We just need to note that by this time, as I told you about the subdivisions of the book of Acts, by this time in the gospel now has gone outside of Jerusalem. It has gone to Judea. And so we are given the story of this man. But we first need to ask ourselves a few things. From the reading, I wanted to read it again with another version, in another version, just to, when I was preparing, I found this reading quite very interesting. Let's read the version, let's read a few verses, just about maybe 5 or 6 verses in the Message version of the Bible. Chapter 10, verse 1, it says, there was a man named Cornelius who lived in Caesarea, or Caesarea, whichever place you want to, how you want to pronounce it, but Caesarea. Captain of the Italian guard stationed there, he was thoroughly a good man. He had led everyone in his house to live worshipfully before God, was always helping people in need, and had the habit of prayer. One day about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he had a vision. An angel of God, as real as his next door neighbor, came in and said, Cornelius. Cornelius stared hard, wondering if he was seeing things. Then he said, what do you want, sir? The angel said, your prayers and neighborly acts have brought you to God's attention. Here is what you are to do. Send men to Joppa. It's a reflection. Try to help me there. Send men to Joppa to get Simon, the one everyone calls Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is down by the sea. As soon as the angel was gone, Cornelius called the 2 servants and one particularly devout soldier from the guard. He went over with them in great detail everything that had just happened, and then sent them off to Joppa. I like this version because it describes Cornelius as a thoroughly good man. We need to first ask ourselves straight away, who was Cornelius? And how is he described in this text? Just a few thoughts. From verse 1, we are told the kind of person we are dealing with. But we are told first where he was living. We are told that Cornelius was living in Caesarea. So Caesarea was the region's largest and the most strategic port city, which was the capital of the Roman province of Judea, and therefore the home of the Roman governor and the home base of his military garrison. If you like, you know, Jerusalem is a Jewish city, the holy city. Actually, Jerusalem is a holy city for 3 religions, even up to now. The Christians consider it holy. The Muslims also say it is the 3rd holiest city. And the Jews consider it very holy. But the Roman authorities who are governing, who are ruling, you need to know that by this time, Israel, basically, or the Jewish community were under the rulership, if you like, of Rome. And for the Romans, they needed a city away from a place with so much religious activities, where the center of things, and that's where Caesarea was. And we are told that Cornelius was one of the leaders of the army there. Number 2, we are told that he was captain of the Italian regiment. When you hear about a regiment, sometimes you might lose the point about this man. But I read somewhere, according to some references that I made, at a full force, the Italian regiment, those days, or any other Roman regiment, by that kind of... 'cause At full force, the Italian regiment would have been about 6,000 soldiers, organized into 10 cohorts of about 600 soldiers each. And each cohort was in turn organized into 6 centuries of about 100 soldiers, comparable to a company. Typically, what we are talking about 120 soldiers, the heads. So when we are talking about Cornelius, it was not your junior kind of soldier. A centurion was the officer in charge of the century of soldiers and therefore comparable to the commanding officer of a company in today's army. In other words, Cornelius, or should I now call him General Cornelius if you like, was no ordinary army officer. We are being told about a senior official by any standard. The third thing we are being told about him, that according to the message version that I've read, he was a thoroughly good man. Thoroughly good man. But NIV says he was God-fearing. We are told that from the NIV it was devout and God-fearing. Devout man. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. And according to Mal Koch in his book, The Bible Handbook to the Acts of the Apostle, Cornelius may have been the first true Gentile Christian convert. He differentiates this kind of conversion from what we are calling proselyte Jews. And there were also what is called the God-fearing Gentiles. Proselyte Jews are those non-Jews or people who are not born, they were not originally born Jews. But with the time, they adopted the culture and the lifestyle of the Jews. And they reached the point of even, actually the ultimate is the circumcision. And those then are called proselyte Jews. But now, when you convert, then you become now a Jew. I was surprised that in Jerusalem, there are also Ethiopian Jews. They have a very interesting history. They claim that the Queen of Sheba was, when she went to see there, when she went to visit Solomon, and she got amazed, she remained there. But that is a story of another. We don't look at that. But the history, the relationship between Ethiopia and Israel basically has been very close over the years. You remember Jesus Christ, he had to go to Africa. You remember? When he was running away from Herod who wanted to kill. So basically Africa has been relating very well with Israel. And so some people, I saw these Ethiopians who are saying they are Jews, they are black. They say they are the black Jews. And they are actually recognized by government. And they trace their ancestry to that visit that happened those days. But so among the proselytes, there were 2 types of proselyte Jews. There were proselyte Jews who went all the way up to circumcision and became adopted. Like now, I think those are brothers from Ethiopia. They completely became Jews. But there were also Jews, Jews who are called, the Gentiles who are called God-fearing Jews. They had not reached the level of being fully adopted to be Jews in the Judaism. And the Ethiopian eunuch is one of them. Some of them were hindered by various circumstances. Ethiopian eunuch, whom we read in chapter 8, had the limitation I told you about. I think I told you about that. That in Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 1, if you read it, it says that the people whose, let me use the euphemism because the way it is put there is not very polite on the pulpit, but it's saying basically people, men who are not able to get children. That's the euphemism version of it. But chapter 23 verse 1 says something very, 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 very unfortunate. That any man who's Basically, eunuchs could not be allowed to get in. And so, they were God-fearing. They would come, but they would remain to worship God at the gates. They were not allowed inside the general courts. You know, the Gentiles, there were several stages, and the Holy of Holies was only visited by the priest once in a year, if you are lucky, if it's your turn. And so, there were several stages of people. Now, this Cornelius had not reached the level of even the Ethiopian eunuch. He was just admiring the Jews from a distance and worshipping the Lord. And that's why you need to get to understand why Peter would be so surprised. Because this man is described that God was already working in him long before even the missionaries, the apostles had gone to preach there. So that is the kind of person we are being told about. He basically fell in this category of Gentiles who, perhaps because of the bankruptcy of paganism, they felt that it's better to worship the monotheistic God. And in their experience, the Jewish God was the one they worshipped, called the Almighty God. The unfortunate thing was that the Israelites had problems with that. They think that God had only to be worshipped in Jerusalem. You know, those many stories. As you see also this playing around in John chapter 4 about this Samaritan woman. You remember that story? That discussion. So, when we are talking about this kind of man, we are talking about someone who is admiring God from a distance and is doing his best, is worshiping and praying to God. And God hears. What then is my point? I'd like just to share with us 4 characteristics of who a lifestyle evangelist is, based on this text that we are going to read. And first, we are saying, based on the reading that we found, lifestyle evangelism is more of demonstrating the gospel than even declaring it. Demonstrating it, showing what it means to be a Christian. Cornelius, I've already told you that he was not a proselyte Gentile. He had not converted. He fell in the category of the many Gentiles who having gotten disillusioned by the just paganism. You know, people out there are discouraged. And they are watching, is there hope? And Cornelius falls in that category of those people. When they watched and they saw, they observed from a distance. The other thing that you need to know is that the relationship between the Jews and the Roman authorities was not the pleasant ones. It was not the encouraging ones. Because you see, as a soldier, he was the one in charge of enforcing the Roman policies and all that, in terms of just ensuring that there is peace. There is some rule and order within the neighborhood, within the headquarters. So getting to hear someone like Peter, getting to approach Peter was a challenge. And so he was a distance observer, right within his heart. He could see what's going on. And for him, he decided that I will worship this God. They had witnessed Jews' strong devotion to God. Even today, the commitment of the Jews to God is amazing. Of course, sometimes they are zealous, and I think their zeal sometimes is without knowledge, especially when they are harassing, like the Palestinians, and you know, life is hard there in the north. But their devotion, it was interesting. It's very interesting when it comes to Sabbath for the Jews. Sabbath is real Sabbath. They switch off their phones, and there is a bell, a siren that rings when it is time for Sabbath, and they announce it. You see the way the Muslims usually announce when it is Ramadan, when they are fasting. They would announce in the newspapers that today's Sabbath is starting at this time, starting at 5:56. And when it's not 6, it's supposed to start at 6 because their days run from 6 to the following day, the 6. But when it is 5:56, there is no Jews in the office. In fact, most of them close office on Friday by lunchtime, just to be ready to receive the Sabbath. They are very devoted. Actually, when you, after hearing that siren, you can literally go to the roads that are the main roads where the Jews are living, and you can even sleep on the road because there is no vehicle moving. Even the trains, they are stopped. People are going to worship the Lord. Their devotion is serious. And so perhaps Cornelius had observed this kind of commitment. They had also heard, he might have also heard the stories said about this God. How he had mysteriously responded to their commitments of the Jews. He must have been baffled even to the core when he had the kind of experiences that these people had gone through. When he's told about this young man who had at one point refused to bow to the superpower of that time because Nebuchadnezzar was a superpower. And they refused to worship an idol. And they were saying, we would rather go to fire. And he must have heard that this man, these 3 men, they were thrown into fire for the sake of their faith. And all of a sudden, the fire did not burn them at all. He must have been told, perhaps, about the story of Daniel. How Daniel, because of his faith again, he refused to stop praying. Even when there was a declaration that people are not going to pray to any other God apart from until permission is given. And King Darius, in chapter 6 of Daniel, threw Daniel into the den of lions. He must have been told these stories, and this thing was fascinating. He must have heard about the stories of these people who went into refugee in the Babylon. And one of the stories that they like singing, there they don't read literally, they sing the scriptures. They memorize them. You know, we are amazed about 48 verses. Those guys memorize. When you go to their temple, they sing the scriptures. And one of the stories that is amazing when you hear about the story of Queen Esther, Cornelius must have heard about this lady, a young orphaned girl who was even a refugee, living only with an uncle who was just a watchman in a foreign land. A young girl who had all of a sudden risen because of her faith to be the queen of that land. And all of a sudden saved the multitude. A massacre that was going to happen, she stopped it. Cornelius must have heard of these stories. And he must have seen people demonstrating in their life the kind of zeal that they have. The Jews wonder when they see countries like Africa, you know, the northeastern, we are told that these are desert. They wonder, what's this? This is not a desert. Because the land in Israel, you get amazed at the kind of stones that are there. It's a rock. And when they are working on their soil to make it to grow, to be able to grow olive tree, you are amazed at the kind of zeal, that the commitment they have. And today, even today, Israel is the biggest exporter of fruits. Even that's oranges. They are very diligent. So these things must have caught Cornelius with awe. And for him, he decided that paganism is not moving. You know, it's not taking you anywhere. And so he decided that he will follow this God. So he must have heard about all these things. He must have observed the people. No wonder Peter now would claim, would confess later on in verse 35 that we've read. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism. Even Peter themselves, even the Jews themselves, they are amazed when people admire the kind of faith they have, the kind of commitments that some of them have. So it does not matter to him whether you are a slave or a master. That is, it does not matter to God whether you are a slave or a master. Whether you are a prostitute or a priest, a leper or a prince, a watchman or an army general, if you earnestly seek him, he will surely turn towards you wherever you are. That's the kind of God we are talking about. If you only earnestly seek the Lord, whether you are a Gentile, whether you are a proselyte or not, if you honestly, from the depth of your heart, wherever you are, if you call on this God, it does not matter. That's what Peter was saying. I now realize that God does not show favoritism, but to anyone who calls upon him. And so, my brethren, I am asking us this question. For Cornelius, he observed there is people around and he felt that this was enough to draw him to this God. He believed out of observing and comparing. People always watch us. People are always watching us, whether we are declaring the gospel or just demonstrating what it means to be a Christian. And so that's what lifestyle evangelism is about. It's about demonstrating what does it mean to be a Christian. If people are complaining in the office, they are quarreling. If everyone is stealing exams because the lecturer has walked out, then unbelievers are watching. You've been telling them all the time you are preaching. Are you also stealing with them? Jesus did not have very kind words to some of us. And I know when we read this scripture, sometimes we don't think that we might be actually the ones he was describing in among the who's, the was. I don't know, is that who or who? Chapter 23. One of the who's that Jesus talks about is, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's face. You yourself do not enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to." Are we like these hypocrites who neither enter the kingdom nor allow those who want to enter? Are we hindering people from getting to the Lord by our behavior? Because I tell you, we always preach. We are preaching all the time. Some of us here get opportunities like me now today to declare gospel here. But we are always preaching. Our lives is always preaching to people. Now you can be a great person on the pulpit, but the people can tell us. I can be here telling you great things about God. But the one who can tell you whether I'm a believer or not are the people I live with. And we are told that this man, his family had also observed and they decided to follow him. That's the challenge of Christianity. That we cannot hide. Our faith cannot hide. It must show. I still remember when I was growing up. Personally, I was brought up in Christian home. Actually, my father, I was born when my father was in the mission field. He started being a pastor with missionaries early. And my father had this, even today, he still has this kind of faith that sometimes we thought when we were young, we were thinking that it's not fair. Some of us, I remember my sister who had said that she cannot be a Christian, she cannot be married to a Christian, to a pastor. Because sometimes we thought that my father was neglecting us. You know, it's zealous, and sometimes I remember this uncle of mine who saw when I was doing exams, working, going to school, and he felt that there was, in the village, pastoring in the village is not as easy as when we are pastoring in town. So life is hard. And my father was not even a pastor, a senior pastor. He was just an evangelist for a long time. Living, he didn't love her house, so he was just living with people. And they would be moved from one place to another. And there was this uncle of mine who came home, and so the way I was going to school, we were struggling. Life was hard. Our house, sometimes when it rained, grass touch, the water would just leak. It was sometimes very difficult to grow up in that house. And so this uncle of mine came home and he told my father, he was working in Mombasa and he wanted my father to go and help him. And the kind of work they were doing, he was working in a quarry. Nobody's cutting stones and all those kind of things. And at one point, my father actually visited him. And he felt that he had a higher calling. So he came back. And he was feeling that my father was not serious. This kind of life is leading. This God of his, what's wrong with you, Nyandega? Why don't you move go to towns and look for a job like other people? These kind of things you are doing is not helpful. Because your family cannot just cope. And I remember my father growing, for him, it meant business. Whether we were sick, whether my mother was sick, when it came to time for prayer, for going for mission, for church, he would go. He would take him to hospital. Sometimes we were thinking that it was not fair. The kind of commitment he had for God, even to date, amazes us. At some point, we had just to agree that maybe he knows more. He knows better than we. And by God's grace, we thank God because he modeled for us what it meant to be a person of faith in God. And I remember when we were growing up in school, even going to school was a problem. I actually repeated school. I repeated class 8, not because I failed, but we just did not have fees. I was called to this school, I could not manage. And there was no money. I went to repeat. When I repeated, now the clan said, your son must go to school. And it was, I don't have time to tell you how difficult it was to go to Agorosari. It's not far from here, some of you know it. But my father believed that God could provide for his son. And I tell you for a fact, we did a fundraiser. The clan, when you are poor, people don't give you much money. The fee we got was just enough for first term, and after that, I actually dropped. We could not continue. I left school. Because I remember when I was going to school, the mattress, one of the places he had preached, there was a mattress, this mattress for the pastor, they said, Pastor after you went a 9. This old mattress, you sleep in it until it changed from Inji Sita to Inji 4 or something like that. And we went to the market. When my father knew that this son must go to school, we went to the market, my mother bought mitumba, clothes, and we literally, how to kusona na mkono? And that was my mattress. When I went to Agorosari Form 1, my mattress was big, long like this. It did not fit that bed, so I had to fold it to fit the bed, a small bed, because the size. And my father believed that God could provide. And he prayed for us earnestly. I was surprised that God answered prayers of anyone, whether you are poor or sick. Because the same God provided for me. When I dropped from that school, I went back home. Of course, I had also a problem. I fell sick. And it was difficult. I only went to Form 2 the following year. So I did only Form 1, first term. Second time I went, we could not continue. And when we went home, there was no reading. I went to Form, and now I could not be allowed in any school unless I repeated. So we tried looking for any school around. This cousin of mine who had invited me to school to pay for my fee. And I remember God providing in very unique ways. In that school, people were just, they were not interested in learning those children. Even though I had not been in Form 1, I realized that these guys have not even finished Form 1 work by the time I went to that school in Form 2. And that's the school I went to. By God's grace, my father kept praying for me. And I passed in that school. Even the teachers were surprised. How can someone pass in this school? Anyone who comes from Nakuru, if you are told the school I was in, everyone gets surprised. How is it possible? But I tell you, God answers prayers. If you model the faith to your children, they pick it up. And so I tell you, people are watching how you are Christian. You can be a great preacher, but your children watch. Tell them, and as an individual, commit yourself that you will be a Christian. Because you don't have to be the pastor. Lifestyle evangelism is about living your life as a Christian. If God says He provides, He provides. Trust Him. If He does not provide, perhaps He does not want you to get that thing. Secondly, lifestyle evangelism is more of practicing our faith than just proclaiming it. Practicing. I tell you, practicing faith is difficult. Once Cornelius believed and received this kind of faith, he started practicing. What does it mean to be a Christian? And we are told he was a thoroughly good man. He was in good relationship with the people around him. When he invited the village and the community members on that day, you remember people came. Some of us are Christians, but our neighbors cannot come to our meeting. He invited them to come when Peter told him he was going to come. So it's not, how do we practice our faith today, for example? How can you practice your faith as a believer in campus when everyone else is? And some of the students have about to fail. I remember our brother. We worked with him in Focus. He could not just finish his course because as the chairman of the CU, he had opposed a lecturer who was using his position to lure girls. And the lecturer said, because you are resisting this, you will not pass my paper. It was very difficult for this brother to finish college. So as a Christian, practicing Christian faith can be challenging. It can cost you something. But that is the cost of discipleship. You know, the cross of Christ was not smoothed. You know, they could have smoothed it, but it was rough. Christian faith is not smooth. So if it calls for, I once worked in this place and I really struggled with the kind of things that go on here. I decided that maybe I better just go and do something else. Because it's difficult to practice faith in the office. Sometimes you need to sacrifice great privileges. Sometimes it might call for you to sacrifice your job. But you know, you better off go to heaven without a job than go to hell with a job. You know, Jesus is the one who taught something very serious. You know, I see some girls, some young ladies, when they reach 30, they start being anxious. Which is greater? Is it better to go to heaven without a husband or go to hell with a husband? Because as a believer, I tell you, if you marry an unbeliever, the Bible calls in the book of John chapter 8, you know, Jesus told the unbelievers as their father, the devil. Anyone who is an unbeliever, according to the scriptures, they are children of the devil. And now if you marry an unbeliever, you are saying you want to be the father-in-law, your father-in-law must be the devil. When the devil comes home, he's coming to visit his family members. Now, how do you cope with that? When the devil comes home, visiting, you should not complain. He is coming to visit his own. So I tell you, you better off, as a believer, lifestyle evangelism will call for you to remain single for life. And if you know that marriage is what is going to take you to hell, Jesus said, if your eye is going to make you to fail, why don't you remove your eye? You're better off in heaven without one eye than have both eyes in hell. Jesus even said, if the hand is the problem, cut the hand. And I tell you, if it is this job that you have is the one that is standing between you and your heaven, why don't you let it go? Practicing Christian life is not an easy thing. Sometimes it calls for sacrifices. When I worked a place in NCCK, I was also coordinating procurement, chairman of procurement committee. And at one point, I remember this guy really persisted. He really wanted to see me. The real thing is that NCCK, we were starting hospitals. And we needed to procure quite a lot of machineries. And this guy could not believe. So, we went out looking for quotations and all that kind of thing. And we awarded tender to someone. But the problem, this brother did not believe that it is possible to give someone tender without something. So when he got 3.4 million tender, he insisted on seeing me. And I told him, my brother, I'm busy. He said, please, I want just to take you for lunch. I said, no, I don't need. The long and the short of it, he pleaded and said, now I know you are a very busy man. I'm going to come, we just meet, I give you that lunch, you owe me, you go. He said, no, I don't need that. And it's difficult out here. And when you tell someone like that, those days my children had been praying for like 2 years for a better, bigger house. And sometimes it's tempting to think this is now the answer. And I decided that at least let me, if someone wants to still let them, I'm not necessarily the perfect one, but I'm trying to practice this faith. God is faithful. He can still provide for you regardless of where you are. So it might call for you to sacrifice a few things. Thirdly, lifestyle evangelism is also about providing for the gospel, even as you pronounce the gospel. Providing for the gospel, providing for it. We are told Cornelius literally provided his home for the villagers to receive this gospel. Sometimes you might not be the best preacher. Like Cornelius was 24/7. He's a busy man. Even if he wanted to go for missions, he can't because he's a soldier. It's difficult for him to go out and preach. But if it's providing for the mission, providing for the gospel, he said he's going to provide. He was generous man. And I have served in Focus in the regional council. And I tell you, we really need people like Cornelius who are going to provide for this gospel. Young people want to hear the gospel. Like last time we were really struggling to raise 5,000 students all over. We have so many students in the universities, but very few Cornelius around. We thank God. God was great. God is gracious, faithful. I was surprised. The previous year, we had tried doing a conference and we had a deficit of 1.9 million. It is a serious deficit. It was serious challenge. The following year, last year, we tried our best to raise, and we tried calling anyone we knew. By God's grace, I was so excited, so encouraged, that God, for sure, does not show favoritism. He provided amazingly. Do you know what? In the last year, that was very difficult with politics and all that. God provided for Focus, and we had a deficit, a surplus of 2 million. Can you imagine? That is the kind of God we are talking about. God can provide for us. And so we are saying that lifestyle evangelism is about providing for the gospel. Let the man of God, like for example, coming with someone. I called a young man, a friend of mine, to come, and I have made it my effort that every time I'm going to preach, I carry someone along. There's some young people I'd encouraged to come here. I don't know whether they have come. But I've made it effort because, sometimes you might not be able to preach to someone. Just invite someone to come to your home. We are told that this man, Cornelius, had provided people with ministry. He was just a nice man, and God saw the kind of things that he was doing. Let me tell you, let me put a disclaimer. Giving. Good works cannot save anyone. We are not saved by good works. We are saved unto good works. We are saved so that our life can change, can impact people's lives. Your giving cannot transform you to be a believer. We give because we have received from the Lord the salvation upfront. But we are told that God saw the kind of act this man was doing and said, your prayer now has been answered. I just want to hear that kind of testimony another time. So you can start providing for the gospel right now. And when I went to STEM program, one of the young men who really encouraged me was a second-year student. I was leading Bible study in the CU, and he said, Kepha, for you, my pastor, we call them pastor as a Bible study leader. If you are going for this term, I might not do a lot of things, but I will give my money towards that meeting. And my brother Macharia supported my STEM program throughout as a student. He did not have a lot of money, but sometimes occasionally we would send 200 shillings, 300 shillings. It was serious encouragement to me. So as a student, you can start modeling, providing for the gospel even now. We are doing something called a tour, and we want to mobilize funds so that we build student centers everywhere, so that students do not suffer when we need to train students. So in Focus Ministry, we are encouraging people, students alike, to also provide for this gospel. Cornelius knew what it meant to be a lifestyle evangelist. You make provision. Like, what about giving your home for a servant of God to just come and just stay there? You can make a commitment right now. Every one of us can be a lifestyle evangelist like Cornelius. You don't have to be a pastor. In fact, I think we have so many pastors. You don't have to be a pastor if God has not called you expressly to be a pastor. But you can be a lifestyle evangelist, someone who transforms people's lives by the way you live. Lastly, I want to say that lifestyle evangelism is also about growing in our faith, rather than grinding our faith. You know, sometimes you can grind your faith to a halt. Growing. You know, when you witness to people, sometimes you think that you are only a conduit of the gospel. But Cornelius experienced, challenged even Peter himself. You know, Peter was a Jew. He observed the laws as it were. God had to intervene from heaven and bring this sheep just to show him that my young man, your servant, I also have other people. Please cut his, kill and eat. And Peter said, no, my Lord. Not me. Until he saw Cornelius. That's why he was confessing that he now realized himself that also God does not show favoritism. As an evangelist, as a lifestyle evangelist, God also amazes you. So actually, if you like, some theologians think that this text is not about the conversion of Cornelius. Because some people think that Cornelius got saved on that day. Really, I don't think so. He already knew the Lord earlier. The Lord just came to affirm that the faith that you have is true. This one is about the conversion of Peter. This text is about conversion of Peter. Peter, wrong theology and attitude had to change. I get amazed. Who is this who is thinking they are believers? And you hate your brother of another tribe. When you are in campus like this, your roommate must only be your tribesmate. Really? Is that how it was originally? You need to be converted like Peter. Peter confessed that I now realize that God does not show favoritism. But anyone he changes. And he never needed to lay his hands on anyone. As he started preaching, the Lord confirmed. And thankfully, he had come with some brethren from the circumcision group, the fellow Jews who also watched. And he asked them, can someone really stop these people from getting baptized? We received it. They have received the Holy Spirit just as we also received. So even the brethren he was with were converted on that day. That is how the door to Gentile world was opened up. And so from this verse, we see in chapter 13, the Bible says that the Holy Spirit had to speak in person. Unfortunately, I think Peter did not really, after this experience, I think he kind of got relaxed and he started now associating himself more with the Jews, fellow Jews. But in chapter 13, the Bible says that in the church in Antioch, there were brethren of these different kinds. There was Barnabas, there was Simon the Nyandega, there was also there was another guy there, the Cyrene. There was also another fellow, then Saul was one of them. And the Holy Spirit spoke to them in prayer, saying clearly, set for me apart Barnabas and Paul for the journey, for the mission I have for them. After this opening of attitude, this experience was very helpful when the Jerusalem Council of chapter 15 had to take place. Because some brethren from among the believers did not believe that Christians could also come from other Jews apart from them, other than Jews. And so, in Acts chapter 15, there was quite an uproar. These people need to also be circumcised so that they can fully embrace Mosaic law the way it was when received it. And I tell you, cultural prejudice can hinder you from ministering the word of God. So I pray that as you do lifestyle evangelism, God will also surprise you. Now, this thing also means that God, there are many admirers of God from outside there, not your traditional kind of believer. The Bible says, you know, in theology there is something we call the visible and the invisible church of God. God has believers all over the world. Sometimes you don't think that there are believers in Taiwan. Sometimes you think there are no believers in North Korea. But God has believers there. Now the challenge for us is to be converted like Peter. The approach for us when we are doing this, we need to go and also see what is God doing in North Korea. If God is calling you to go and serve Him in Somalia, don't stop it. For example, we need teachers in the Northeastern. The last batch of teachers came back because of the persecution, the terrorists. But a believer needs to know, like Paul says, that for me to live is Christ, but to die is a great gain. And for you to be a lifestyle evangelist, you need to know that your life is not based on the job that you have. Your survival is not based on the kind of remuneration. It's not, your safety. No soldier is saved by his army, the Bible says. We need to know that our faith is of the Lord. And if the Lord calls me to Northeastern to go and be a teacher, then just be a good teacher. These non-believers, I tell you, belong.